before the locusts came, there already were programs to try and boost and cushion them in terms of food security, because these are areas that are also perennially also food insecure. Now, can you imagine that whole issue of ensuring food security in these particular regions of the northeastern parts of the country being ravaged by locusts, billions and billions of them? What is that? What is happening to those communities? What's going to happen after these locusts leave? What is it that we are doing as a government in terms of our food security, implementation of our food security policy? Again, just like every other thing, in Kenya, we have a very lovely food and nutrition security policy. Oh, lovely. A good one. Implementation of that, we also need to question that. We have seen that there are reforms that the Ministry of Agriculture has been pushing in terms of now food security, looking at staple food of maize and increasing other cereals as well into this basket, looking at how we manage the National Cereals and Produce Board. We spoke to a man in charge of the man who chaired the committee that was proposing those reviews and what they have in mind. Today, let's speak to the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Crop Production and Agricultural Research. This is Professor Hamadi Boga. Professor, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
We are well, thank you. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Now, Prof, let me just give a bit of your background. You you were the founding Vice Chancellor of the Taita Taveta University, and
Yes.
you are an expert in microbial ecology of insect guts, soils, and soda lakes.
Yes.
Insect guts.
Yes.
What is?
Yes.
What is that?
That means the digestive system of insects.
This includes.
And I specifically specialized on termites.
Uh-huh.
And termites, apart from fungi and microorganisms in the soil,
Yeah.
termites are responsible for the highest turnover of biomass in the savannas.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to the savannas, for example, you see the elephants,
Yeah.
but the real ecosystem engineers are the termites.
Mm-hmm.
So their impact on the ecosystem is bigger than
It's
the
bigger
impact
than that of the elephant.
all herbivores, not just elephants.
When you say that they're the chief engineers and the ones in charge of that habitat, Professor, please give a little more detail, because this is very interesting. What is it that they do that gives them this wonderful position that they have?
But, I know in school you learned about the carbon cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So if the carbon does not cycle, then you have these problems that you see about climate change and so on and so forth. The climate change issues are caused by destabilization of the carbon cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So in the carbon cycle, the termites in the savanna play a very crucial role. If you put a piece of wood in the savanna and kill all the termites around it, you will find it there 50 years down the line, because the only organism with a machinery to break that down is the termite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that is a conversation for another day.
A big one, yes. Let's talk about food security. You're the PS in charge of crop production and agricultural research.
Yes.
When we talk about food security, the first thing that we think about is crop production, of course, and livestock as well.
Yes.
We have a very lovely food and nutrition security policy.
Yeah.
We've been seeing a couple of reforms, but this country is still food insecure.
Yes, this country is 25% food insecure. We are able to produce 75% of our own food, with a population of 47 plus million. The number of really food insecure Kenyans is below 10 million.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say we are 75% food insecure, those are the facts, and that is the reality. And so in the Big Four agenda, We have a number of targets that were set by His Excellency the President. One of those targets is to reduce the number of food insecure Kenyans by 50%. So when we look at the numbers and the distribution of the food insecure Kenyans, you find a large majority of them are in northern Kenya northern Kenya, northeastern there, and also northwestern. And our programs, we have quite a number of programs that are targeted in that area. We have a portfolio with World Bank for the needy counties across sectors that is meant to change the circumstances there in northern Kenya. And this portfolio with the World Bank is targeting the issues of schools and education, the issues of infrastructure, the issues of Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture, which we run here in the ministry under the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Program. We also have portfolios supported by the African Development Bank on drought resilience livelihood support program, all of them targeting northern Kenya. We also have portfolios under the small irrigation value addition project, also all of them targeting northern Kenya. So there's a lot of work going on right now. Started about 2 years ago, and it will go on for the next 5 years. It's not an event that you can switch on and switch off food security issues. You have to plan and work systematically towards the attainment, and that is what we are doing.
So essentially, when you talk about food security, then we're looking at the ability to provide, basically putting food in the mouths of Kenyans. That's what we are saying specifically food security is about?
Food security is a very broad issue. The way we see it in the ministry, in our recently launched agriculture sector transformation and growth strategy, is that number one, our food production system, we have to understand it, all of us properly, and understand the issues that are challenging it. 85% of our production is smallholder production. So we have to understand the issues that are challenging smallholder production. So we have a whole anchor in the strategy that deals with smallholder farmers. And our biggest outcome in that, and it's part of the outcome of the Big Four, is to increase the smallholder farmer income. What makes the smallholder farmer struggle with income? Why are they still in poverty? Because so long as they are in poverty and they're giving up, then it undermines our food security system.
True.
Because 85% of it is reliant on the smallholder farmer. So we have two pillars in this strategy that deal with the smallholder farmer. And pillar one is basically to look at the ecosystem around the smallholder farmer. What do they need in their ecosystem for them to thrive? And we have we have identified what they need. What they need are input suppliers. What they need are mechanization service providers. What they need are off-checkers. What they need are processors in their neighborhood. What they need are post-harvest handling facilities. So our strategy is to create SMEs around these needs of the smallholder farmer, but also to focus on organizing the farmer. Because they are small, the only way they can have a voice and be relevant and to get their issues sorted out is if they are organized. And that is why we are also investing a lot on farmer organization, or what we call producer organization. So all our programs are value chain based programs that are working with farmers together with the counties to create this ecosystem to sustain production. A smallholder farmer on their own out there is like a gazelle walking through the Serengeti without the security of other members of the clan of that gazelle. So we need the smallholder farmers to be organized, and that is where most of our effort is going. And if you had in the 8-point plan of His Excellency the President, in the ministry we used to have a big program on fertilizer, but which was abused. And we have reformed that, and we have moved towards e-voucher. And the e-voucher works very well with this ecosystem, because it means you have to register the agrobase, you have to register the farmers, and you have to register the other service providers so that the farmer, if they are being supported 40% by the government on the services they need to carry out production, you are working with non-stakeholders that are supportive of the farmer with an expected output that is co-designed, and we are able to monitor the farmer, because most of the time in the first, you would give the fertilizer to NCPB, somebody would buy it, you would know the person, but you are not even sure whether they are farming or they are going to resell it, buy it at a cheaper price.
Yeah.
And so in the end, we could not monitor the effectiveness of our own program. But with this, the farmers are geotagged, so we can see the farm, even from satellite imagery, we can see whether production is going on, and we can see, even with the current power of satellites, you can see whether the farm is doing better.
It's actually doing better than before.
Than before, because you have a history of production in the farm anyway. And in future, we can keep records of all this and see whether our interventions are making an impact on the farmer instead of just
Who
throwing
is
money.
charged with ensuring that these wonderful policies are actually implemented in the counties?
In the counties, we are working, of course, with the governors and the CECs. And for all our programs, we have a national steering committee and we have a county steering committee. And in the first 5 years of devolution, it was a bit of struggle because of push and pull. But right now we have found a mechanism.
Push and push.
It was push and push, yes. Yes. But it is working. I think we just have to realize that as Kenyans, we have a common vision, which has been set out by His Excellency the President, of food security, which is a powerful vision. Every country should be able to feed itself. And if we focus on that, the other issues are secondary.
Professor, tell us this. If this policy is working, what picture should we see around the country?
And after how long?
I think if this policy is working, and it will work, we have to make it work, because we don't have a choice. We have a population which is growing and it needs to be fed. And if it doesn't work, that means we have to then get food from somewhere else. If it is working, we will see a proliferation of service providers around the farming communities, and they will be improving their own income as well as their interaction with the farmers. We will see an increased income for the farmers. We will see increased production. Let me give you an example. When I look at the map of maize production in this country, I'm mentioning maize because it is an emotional crop and a political one for that matter. You see a lot of emotions around maize, which is okay because it's a major staple. But if you look at the production, the farmer is doing an average of 2 metric tons per hectare. Our counterparts in Ethiopia, just by rejigging the way they interact with the farmer, have raised it to 5 metric tons per hectare.
Wow.
And so our biggest struggle is to get the farmer to produce more on less acreage. That way they will earn more, there will be more food. Right now the tendency has been, it is declining, and largely because of the way the farmer is interacting with the soil. Our policies in the past of giving DAP have partly contributed to the problem of the soil health. And so with our interaction and with the new programs and the conversations that we are having, like in the e-voucher, one of the primary things is to do soil testing before you buy the fertilizer. So very soon we'll have a soil testing service provider onboarded to make sure that the farmers we are interacting with have their soil tested. Only 8% of Kenyans test their soil. The rest just buy any fertilizer, and that I can tell you for sure is hurting the soil, is hurting productivity, and is hurting the incomes of the farmers. And this is a conversation of also capacity building, awareness raising. Some of the things that we have to do are soft issues, but they are key issues in the production system.
What exactly within this policy is the government committed to doing to ensure that farmers can actually find competitive markets for their produce? Because this has been a problem for the longest time.
I think the problem of markets is, I agree with you, is a thorny one, but it's not a difficult one, because if we are food insecure to an extent of 25%, it means the market is there, because the market is you and me. We want to buy this maize. And we want to buy these commodities because our lives depend on it. And we have the purchasing power behind it. The problem of the market, I think we have to rethink the way the market is structured, and we are doing that. There are a number of agri-tech companies that have proliferated, and they are increasing. And we want to put our focus on there. I'm talking about companies like Trigger Foods, which started its business about 3 years ago. What they do, they contract their farmers. So the farmer grows, knowing I'm growing for Trigger Foods.
Yep.
So and then they respect the contract. Okay. So what we are trying to do is talk with the millers for maize, because that is where the biggest problem is, to contract the farmers already, because the millers consume about 30 million bags. Okay? And so if there are farmers there who are able to produce these 30 million bags, and they are contracted by the millers, already that market problem is solved. And so we want to encourage to go in this direction. The challenge, when I ask the millers, where is the challenge? Why can't you do this? This is a no-brainer. At least you will know your farmers. You will know they are producing for you. You will know they are engaging in good agricultural practice. You can even monitor the issue of aflatoxin properly.
Yep.
So I think this is a space where we are going to really push a conversation, but a business conversation. Because as a government, our role is to provide an enabling environment for business to thrive.
But there must be something, Professor, that has made the millers not venture into this. I mean, they have seen it happen. They've seen sorghum growers, tobacco growers are contracted.
Exactly.
And yet the millers have not ventured into this. There must be something that has been hindering them.
I think in the past what happened is they would go into contract, and then the people down there, because of the high demand, would find somebody with a better price and they would sell it. So where the contracts are not respected and you have already made initial investment, then that is what has been discouraging. But I think this is a space, if we push just a little bit, and with the registration of farmers, I think we can restructure that sector. This is a big problem, especially for maize. But I think for the other value chains, the other issues can be sorted probably differently. But this looks like a low-hanging fruit that just needs conversation and policy guidance, which we are ready to do.
Talking of policy guidance, there has been talk, a great deal of talk about how it is that the importation of certain key staple grain into the country also impacts on these local farmers and their produce and their marketing of the produce. Is this a statement of truth, or is it just, as I said, conversation that people are having?
No, it depends on how it's done. I think in the past, the way we have done it has impacted negatively on the farmers. And when we came in, we were determined to correct that to a certain extent. There are two commodities where this happens, where the ministry is sort of heavily involved. The first one, of course, is wheat. We produce about 3 million bags of wheat, and we consume about 12 million bags of wheat. Okay, and so we have a regime which was established when His Excellency the President was Minister for Finance, and it has been working very well, where the farmers and the millers negotiate. the country needs wheat. We can only produce 3 million bags. The rest we have to import. But we have to have importation arrangements that do not impact on the farmer. So we only allow them to import after they have agreed with the farmers on the price they are going to offtake the local wheat. And so the release of importation permits is tied to offtake of local wheat. And so by the time the end of the year is done, the local wheat has been taken up, and the imported wheat is also flowing in a steady way to assure food security. So for one bag of local wheat, we import another 5 because of the demand. And we're looking whether there is possibility to upscale local wheat production. But as you know, wheat is a cold has a crop for cold environment. So other countries have more competitive advantage. So if you look at our production costs for wheat, they are about 3,000 shillings or thereabout. That means the farmer is pushing for a price of 3,500, 3,200. So usually it's a big struggle. I've started some of these negotiations. But imported wheat comes here at about 1,500. So you can see the difference. Basically, other countries have a competitive advantage as far as wheat production is concerned. That's just a scientific fact.
I can appreciate the difficult conditions that.
Maybe you allow me to talk about the maize one.
Yes, please.
Because maize is, as I said, our spiritual crop. So, so with the importation of maize, in the past we would import duty-free, and it would come here at 2,000 shillings. If we import it duty-free and we have bought it at a time when the market is right, people are harvesting in Latin America or South Africa, it would come here at 2,000 shillings or even less. The production cost in other countries is very low. But if we follow that production cost again and we import, the local farmer will not be able to compete because the production costs locally are about 2,200. Part of it is because of the low productivity. I told you about 2 metric tons per hectare, while in Mexico and US they are doing 12 metric tons per hectare. So per hectare they have a competitive advantage. So this time we said, okay, how much duty should we put onto maize to enable the local farmer to be competitive? So this time when we said we allow for 2 million bags importation, we put a duty of 14% on it, because we knew if we put a duty of 14%, it will arrive in Mombasa at around 3,100 there. And 3,000 is a good price that the farmer are comfortable with. So the local maize farmer is not disadvantaged, and the country has food, because right now as we talk, most of the food most of the maize that was available for millers is done, and the harvest season has not arrived. So we start harvesting around August. So we allowed the window of importation latest by 31st of July, so as not to interfere with the season. So that way we secure the consumer, and we protect the farmer, and we make sure that the country has food. So it's a question of the willingness on our part to look at the numbers, of production, and to have a solid food balance sheet that we are tracking to see whether we'll have food throughout or whether there will be a shortage and when that shortage will be, and to be disciplined in the way we import. This time we said government should not import. Government has no business importing food.
If I may ask, Professor, I mean, just as
instead the millers themselves import. Even this time around, we said no traders, because the traders would add another cost. They would import and then sell to the millers. In this case, we said let the millers be the ones importing, because they are the ones facing the shortage.
Okay, Professor, and I think we've looked at importation as a solution in a lot of cases, and we can appreciate the difficult conditions under which we need to then plant and harvest, right? Yes. Is it the solution? And I can understand these conditions that we talk about, hectareage and being able to harvest per hectare and thus when we compare with other countries. Are there not, what would be the problem? What's that thing that's stopping increased production? And can it not be looked at as a solution instead of going towards the importation option every time? And I'm talking about future, not just now.
I think the solution is still in the STGS, the Agriculture Sector Transformation and Growth Strategy. We have other pillars there. The pillar we have talked about is the smallholder pillar. We have another pillar which is creating large-scale farms.
Right.
You know, in the past, after independence, because of attachment to land and because our independence was about land, we went into creating settlement scheme, which meant subdividing large parcels of land, which I think was a mistake in that sense, because now it's undermining our food security. So we want to now, using Pillar 4, to go back into large-scale farming by creating around 500,000 acres, opening up 500,000 acres to commercial production. And this is, again, because land is another spiritual issue, it's a conversation that we need to have with the communities, with the counties, and ourselves in the national government. So in the next 2 months, we'll place before Cabinet a paper to see opening up of large-scale farms, including the Galana Kulalus and other large-scale farms that are owned by public institutions that are currently not being used for production. So that is the plan that is in place, and we think with the large-scale production, if we can increase it to about 40%, not the 14% that we have now, we will be able to bridge this gap. Large-scale production is commercialized, and it's efficient, and they are able to reach higher productivity levels than small-scale farmers. And I think this is something that is doable. When we talk with the large-scale farmers, they are keenly, they are clear that they can, what they need is the land, what they need is good financial arrangements with banking institutions, where the interest is not like for real estate or for other kind of commercial undertaking. It's moderated at a lower level, and the security requirements have nothing to do with like having a title for the whole land, otherwise, so that they have flexible arrangements the way they have in other countries. And then the other thing is having superior genetics, because part of the productivity gap, you can bridge that by having the right genetics. And the large-scale farmers feel outside there are superior genetics than we have access to right now. And that means working with Calro and Kefis to access these superior genetic much faster. So superior livestock breeds and superior maize varieties or wheat varieties or sorghum varieties. And this way we'll bridge this. And I think this is something that we can do in the next 1 year, comfortably open up like 50 such farms. And once we have known how to do it, we can continue expanding. And of course,
we'll hold you to that. We'll hold you to that, Bonapias.
We'll do it. We'll do it.
Within the next 1 year. We have been promised things.
No, we'll do it. It's just a way of working in a systematic way and persuading people that the solutions that are being put on the table are practical and they are feasible, and all we need to do is get all stakeholders to understand and buy in, and to understand that our survival and our food security will depend on doing things differently,
right,
and not continuing with business as usual.
Let's talk about locusts now, Professor. We know that we are expecting that around now this time, June, July, a fresh wave of locusts, like that's going to be over 20 times bigger than what we've seen before, will be crisscrossing the country. What is it that the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, is doing in fighting the locusts, and also addressing the food security of these communities that have been impacted by the locusts?
No, the locust came it was an explosion. At the beginning, around November, we started having these predictions.
Yep.
And we started having these predictions, and we started seeing the locust heading towards East Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Towards East Africa. And, the locusts have not been here in the last 70 years.
Yep.
Okay? So
Yep.
it's not a pest we are familiar with.
Yep.
In the ministry, we have a small unit called the Plant Protection Services Department.
Mm-hmm.
It has about maybe 10 people who are familiar with the locusts, because we are always fighting the tree locust in Turkana and northern Kenya.
Yeah.
These are domesticated species.
Mm.
So when we heard that this time around the locusts would come, we started preparing. We bought the chemicals required. We talked to the Desert Locust Control Organization of East Africa, which has the mandate of controlling locusts across the region. But when the wave came, it was so big that we realized this is a biblical wave of locusts that we had never seen before. And so countries and organizations like FAO, who have experience with locusts, quickly came in. So we formed a very strong coalition with FAO, with DLCO, with the World Bank, with the African Development Bank, and our own Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives, to form a formidable team together with the counties that were impacted to do surveillance, because to control them, because they are migratory pests, it means you have to do surveillance.
Yeah.
And that means you have to train people on the ground, which we did. We had now to have a serious supply of chemicals, more than we had budgeted for, because the initial budget from the government was about 500 million, but the waves were just too big and too many and too scattered. I think at one time when we were looking at the surveillance, almost half of Kenya or 3/4 of Kenya had these locusts in one way or the other.
Yes.
But I think the interventions of working with local communities, counties, the government itself, international organizations, and the coordination that we were able to put in place meant that we could track, we could spray, we could continue training and making sure that communities are prepared to deal with this menace. We also appreciate the private sector, because the pesticides are usually provided by the private sector. Even in the COVID kind of environment where we were facing challenges, we still managed to get some of these chemicals. We also got a lot of chemicals from FAO and other donations from China and other countries, which has meant that we are keeping things under control. We've had now 2 generations. The first generation hatched and flew, and the second generation is now hatching. Because every intervention that we do, you kill about maybe 60, 70%. 30% still escape, because some of the territories that have been there are vast. If locusts go and lay eggs in Suguta Valley, which they have, there is no way you are going to go there. So you have to wait for them to start flying to deal with them. Some of these areas are very insecure. Areas like Mandera, there with Al-Shabaab, areas like Garissa, Wajir, all of them are problematic areas. So like the spray helicopters or even the spraying planes cannot fly there, because for them to spray, they have to fly at the level of a tree for them to spray the chemicals. So we avoided going to those areas. Instead, we gave local people the equipment for spraying, but that is usually not enough.
So, Professor, just moving the conversation along. So we now have this second wave, which is obviously larger than the first one, and it's across the country. Now, the question specific is to food security for the people. First of all, dealing with this current larger swarms of locusts, and 2, what it's doing to the communities and what the government is doing to help the communities.
Let me correct you on that. The second wave is smaller.
Oh, is it?
Yes, much smaller, because we have done a lot of work containing. The first wave was in 28 counties. This wave is in 3 counties, Turkana, Marsabit, and Samburu, right at the corner. And right now it's in different stages. There are hoppers which are crawling. and eating and trying to grow into adults. And then we have some adult swarms which have started fledging. Fledging means shedding their skin, readiness to take flight. But we know they won't fly immediately because they have to increase their body mass and store enough energy to enable them to fly across to Ethiopia and all the way to Pakistan and India. And so we have an international obligation to continue the control and surveillance measures which we are doing. And right now there's a team on the ground seriously spraying and controlling both ground and aerial spray in Turkana, Samburu and Marsabit to minimize as much of them as possible, as much of them as we can reach, so that they don't go into Sudan or Ethiopia and all the way to Yemen again and cause havoc there. And then if they are not able to control them there, October, November, when the winds turn, we'll have another invasion, which we are also trying to avoid. So this is a collaborative effort scattered across the countries to make sure that things are brought under control.
Do you think that this will actually be managed this time around, Professor? Because even if it may be in fewer counties, according to the same FAO, they're looking at, even if it's in a number of counties, in terms of the actual number of pests, possibility of them being larger than the first is actually quite great, according to FAO.
We interact with FAO, and sometimes maybe the way they communicate, some of the messages get mixed up. You know, every locust produces about 300 eggs. So if we had not done any measures to kill the 70% that we did, it would have been 300 times larger. So we are not seeing that scale. Instead, we are seeing a more reduced scale. Of course, intense for Turkana, because Turkana did not have those levels at the beginning. But because their geography and their soil, terrain, and texture is a very suitable habitat for breeding. So you see these masses in Turkana. And when I talk to the governor, I can see his distress, because he's saying they are walking all over Lodwar town. But I think the interventions that we are doing together and the scaling up of the operations around Turkana, Marsabit, and Samburu will manage most of this before in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then we see whether weather elements also help, because some of them you will not be able to reach just because of the remoteness of the places we are talking about. These places are very remote, and they are half Marsabit and Samburu and Turkana is almost half the size, half of Kenya, when you look at the scale of operations there. And the team has been working since January non-stop to manage this menace, and they have done a good job, and we are confident that we have this thing under control.
Something that I find intriguing, how is it that you determine the migratory patterns of these locusts?
What we have done is that we have trained local scouts to use an app called eLocust 3M, which was developed by FAO together with a university in the US. And once they take a picture of locusts in a particular locality and load some details, the data goes direct to FAO and to the ministry. And that data that surveillance data, together with the rainfall data, together with the wind movement data, is used now using a model that FAO has developed to show you where next the locusts are likely to head if not managed. So that way we have been using those surveillance maps. I think I can share with you some of the maps if you give me your numbers, so that you see that technology has really been helpful in guiding the intervention, both surveillance and control and reporting. So what we have are forecasts that come from FAO every week, so that we can send resources where the forecast is most likely to happen. And those maps have been perfect. Those maps have been very perfect, and they have really guided these interventions to avoid wasting resources in areas where the locusts will not go.
Let's conclude the conversation, Professor, with the question on food security, securing the communities that were affected by these locusts. What interventions has the government put in place?
I think we have programs in all these places, and there is a study that is being done by Red Cross, which will inform our own interventions. And there are various actors who are already intervening in this space, because, again, just the way the fight for the locusts was a multi-stakeholder fight, the fight to rebuild livelihoods also has to be multi-stakeholder. So, like I said, we have various programs from ourselves in the ministry, from our partners in World Bank, from FAO, from other NGOs acting on the ground.
Okay.
And the idea, once the Red Cross concludes the study and we have identified the most impacted communities, we think there'll be like 12, 13 counties. Then livelihood support programs will come in to support the communities to rebuild and to be resilient.
Yeah.
I think these communities are the ones that where the most food insecure Kenyans are, like you said in your opening statement. And even without the locusts, we still have to continue intervening in these places so that they come to the same level of food security like the rest of the country.
Okay. Asante sana, Professor Hamadi Boga, for speaking to us.
Asante sana.
Professor is the Principal Secretary in the State Department for Crop Production and Agricultural Research. Have a good day, Prof.
I hope one time we can have a conversation about insect guts.
Yes. We'd love for you to come and actually...
It's intriguing in the title alone. I think we need to get into it more.
We actually would like you to come and physically have this discussion with us in the studio.
With us here.
I'll be happy to do that.
I have a gut feeling it'll be an interesting one.
Thank you.
Talking about working with farmers, improving this value chain, encouraging other players to come in so that the smallholder farmers can...
Setting up the support system.
That support system. All that, on paper. Very good. It comes to implementation, and then people start looking at, where can I play in this? Can I be the one who's doing the mechanization? Or can I delay this so that I can basically reap bigger rewards by doing one or the other?
Why you heard me ask that is because for the longest time, with all the sugar factories we have in the country, we've never been able to produce enough sugar to meet the demand we have in the country. So there's always been need to import sugar. Now, one could ask for a better position when it comes to marketing your product, because this is something in demand.
Yeah.
And yet literally every government run sugar factory has closed down, or is on its knees, or is limping. And yet private sugar companies that were built much, much later seem to be thriving.
They're doing okay.
And yet, even with the COMESA rules and what have you, sugar importation seems to have even surpassed the quota that was laid out for them. So hence that question, because this is part of the agricultural sector. Okay? And what all this has meant is that the very farmer who's supposed to benefit from this particular product is the one person who doesn't benefit from it. In fact, he ends up being impoverished.
Indeed. Again, on food security for especially those the northeastern parts of the country, the northern parts of the country, now being ravaged by swarms of locusts. Like the PS has said, in terms of Turkana are seeing increased numbers because they've never dealt with this kind of numbers before. The governor of Turkana is calling the ministry all the time and saying, look, guys, we need to see more and more interventions happening. This is impacting a lot of these communities in these areas, pastoralist communities, even those that are, moving into crop production. They're still now wondering, so why did I move into crop production if something can come and just decimate everything that I've tried to grow in the last couple of months? You asked the question, CT, on how they determine the movement of these animals. How is it possible that we could have told these things are hatching in Oman, and in a few months' time, they will be in Kenya? And then from here, they are going to South Sudan or into Uganda or going back into
they're going to
Ethiopia.
India.
Or they end up in Pakistan, India and Pakistan. Let's speak to somebody who's actually a climate scientist now, all right? His name is Abubakr Babiker. He's with the IGAD Climate Center. Abubakar is here. He's dealing so much with the locust invasion in the country and where the movement, not just in the country, but actually in the region, from when they started crossing over from Oman, Yemen, coming into Somalia, into Ethiopia, Kenya, and the region, and now that whole movement and the breeding and the multiplication of the swarms. Abubakar, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Abubakar, and welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much for having me. And good morning to your speech and to your audience.
My colleagues here say good morning to you too.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Abubakar, a climate scientist. Let's just get into that question of your prediction. How it is that you're able to predict the movement, the multiplication, and the impact of the locusts as they move around the region.
Great. Yeah, we are a climate center, belong to the intergovernmental organization, IGAD, and our main work is on climate forecast. But when the desert locust outbreak is started to impact the region, we have the capacity to produce weather forecast, and we also have technical staff who have the capability to provide a forecast for the desert locust. So we started to use the climate information or the information of weather forecast. For example, the forecast for the wind, rainfall, temperature, soil moisture, and we merge that with the information from satellite for the greenery, for example, the vegetation cover, because this is one of the factors that also control the movement of desert locusts. And one of my colleagues, he developed this model to use for the desert locust forecast. So our main product is a climate forecast, but due to the emergence of this desert locust issue, we moved into also forecasting desert locusts.
Looking at what the situation is now, I mean, obviously you're over a larger region, but with what is happening now, and of course the question is, how long is this going to be? How long is this going to continue to ravage the country? And it's a concern for those who are keepers of livestock. It's a concern for those who are farmers. It's a concern for the general public, of the country. If you're able to predict their migratory pattern, are you able then to predict how long this menace is going to be here?
The length of the desert locust staying is, of course, depending on the controlling mission. How successful is the country? For example, if you are talking about Kenya or other country in the neighboring region, this is one major factor, and I think Kenya is doing very well in this domain. As you have heard on the speaker before me, he gave a detailed on how their controlling mission is working so far. So far, it is mostly in the northern Kenya, in Turkana region, and the worry is that it might migrate to the northern part or southern Sudan and maybe Sudan. So you need to control locally and also watch out for the neighboring countries, what is happening in neighboring countries, because that might be also a risk for another outbreak might come to Kenya also from other countries.
Let me ask, the science of predicting the migration of locusts, would you say it's an exact science?
It's hard to say it is an exact science per se, but this is what we produce now. We call it like a projection, because desert locusts are well known to move according to the climate and weather condition, and they also move according to the ecological condition, the vegetation cover, the soil moisture, and all this. So But the issue is that you are modeling physical features like wind and temperature and rainfall. Those are natural phenomena. You could predict them with a good accuracy, but then you have animal behavior that is also included in the picture. So what we do is we give like an informative guess for what is the potential location. So then the controlling mission has to focus the effort there. And so far, actually, our product, it was the first, actually, worldwide, I would say. That is what was produced by Climate Prediction Center, in a way that used climate and satellite information to produce very accurate and good quality forecast for the desert locust.
Abubakar, let me ask the political question. As scientists, when you sit and you even come up with all these models and projections, and you pass the information on to the political actors in governments, do you feel like they act on your information immediately? For example, in this particular case of this locust invasion?
Yes, very well. They did act very well, especially in Kenya, I would say so. In some other countries, we actually produce this forecast for the whole region. And not only for Kenya, but for the whole region, our model for the region. So some countries did respond in a like a speedy way. Some other countries, due to limitation, maybe in financial resources or some issue of political instabilities, that maybe hinder the action from the government side. But for Kenya, from what I'm seeing and reading in the news, I think they have done very well.
What would a good intervention look like? Like, for instance, in Kenya, we know that the government has been trying their level best to contain the locust, but we knew in advance that the locusts might very well land in Kenya. What would a good intervention look like?
A good intervention is that we really need an early warning system. And a problem like desert locust, it shouldn't be just a matter of one country. It's a regional issue, because if a country, even if Kenya did everything that is possible on their to control desert locusts, there is still risk from what is happening in your neighboring country. So what is needed is that we have to strengthen regional institutes, for example, like IGAD Climate Center or the Regional Center for Desert Locust Control. Those organizations has to be well-funded, well-supported, and they have to adopt the most recent and advanced technology in surveillance, identifying the problem from early stage, and so to anticipate it from early stage, and we be prepared. That would be a more effective approach, because it is not only a national issue. Even if you control your country very well, you still have that risk from invasion from the neighboring country.
Yeah.
So a more regional effort is more needed, actually.
Abubakar, thank you very much for speaking to us, and we congratulate you on the good work that you're doing at the IGAD Climate Center, and especially now coming up with, like what you're saying, the first tool in the world that was able to actually collect and give data on locust invasions.
Thank you very much for having me, and we hope to communicate further. We have interest actually to share our information through radio, because it is very effective in reaching people in rural areas. So we're happy to talk to you in the future in any relevant issues.
Thank you very much.
Our platform is open to you.
Thank you,
Asante
sir.
sana.
Asante sana, nashukuru.
Coming up to 9 o'clock, the Situation Room. This conversation continues on our social media platforms as well. CT Muga, today's proverb.
The grasshopper which was killed by the locust must be deaf.
Apt at this point.
Right.
Dalili ya mvua ni mawingu. That's basically the simplest translation of this in Swahili.
Yes.
Okay.
As they say, forewarned is forearmed.
Yeah, forewarned is forearmed.